Okay, I'm going to turn to Jeff Gates. In terms of the response that Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has given, well, he has dismissed the documents released by Wikileaks as worthless, prepared and released by the U.S. government to reach their political objectives. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that's the analysis is often blaming it on the U.S. government again. I think what's telling here is what's not reported. Again, there's nothing in here about the concerns about the impact of the Israel-Palestine conflict on U.S. interest in the region. Nothing about that. Nothing about Israelis and pro-Israelis and Israeli assets being the common source of the false intelligence that took us into war in Iraq. There's nothing on that. Enormous amounts of concern. If you indeed are trying to launch a war and take us into Iran, you best find a way to neutralize the U.S. military, because I think at this point, at least in the highest ranks, they realize that we've got an enemy inside the government now that took us to war on false intelligence. And so you better do something like this kind of release to say, oh no, this isn't false intelligence, this is really real. You've got to create that sort of notion of plausibility and credibility, not unlike the false intelligence that took us into Iraq. You've got to create this narrative, this sort of sense of we're in danger, and the source of the danger is Iran, and that is not the source of danger. Based on the analysis of how we went into Iraq, we know that's not the case. Again, the timing, I think, is everything. And with the legitimacy of Israel very much at issue now, particularly now a known fact that the common source of the false intelligence was pro-Israelis, almost just uniformly, then there's a lot at stake here for Israel if they could not successfully pull off an operation like this. And keep in mind, Turkey just asked that we no longer share any intelligence with the Mossad, with Israel. So they're beginning to be isolated. I think they know it. I think Netanyahu realizes they've overcome. So what do? Well, I think it's a bit of a desperation move, and it may work. We'll see. Certainly, I'm watching the media here. It's absolutely awash with this. Anything on peace on ending the settlements or closing down the occupation is absolutely off the agenda now. It's all Iran, Iran, Iran.
That's true. And Franklin Lamb, I mean, when we look at the way, well, first of all, Israel's reaction was this release of these documents was to our benefit in terms of vis-a-vis the viewpoints that Israel wanted to be reflected on Iran. But what about the timing? I mean, you know, this is information that WikiLeaks presumably did have beforehand. But why do they choose now? Why not 2 months ago and maybe prior to that? Why now?
Yeah. Good question. I do not know the answer to that. I'm inclined to take them at their word that it takes time to process them. You know, it's a garage out of the briefcase sort of operation, apparently. He doesn't have much of a staff. They had some dissension, as you know. I don't know the answer to that. It's certainly curious. It's interesting. But I'm inclined to think that, and I heard this afternoon that Julian has made a statement there's going to be a lot more just as fast as we can get them out. And you know, they are pressuring him a little bit. I mean, he's being threatened. You know, there's a warrant for him out of Sweden on maybe a legitimate or an illegitimate charge. The guy's under pressure. He's having to move around.
But nothing has happened to him.
Yeah.
But nothing has happened to him.
Well,
and he says he lives in airports. So of all places, where security is everywhere.
I got great questions. I think we just don't have the answers tonight on that.
Well, let me get Stephen Lenman in here about the timing of these documents. Why now, and in terms of the information that's focused in some parts on Iran.
Well, timing is always on my mind, and I got an article today about another U.S. political prisoner, a man who was charged over the weekend, a man named Mohammed Osman Muhammad. And he's charged with wanting to set off a bomb at a Christmas lighting display in Portland, Oregon. Well, why did this come out now? The FBI apparently has been following him for 6 months. I don't believe any of it. I think he was set up, and the FBI even admits that a sting was instigated against him. He was set up. The FBI really goaded him and supplied everything to get him to do something he never have thought of doing in the first place. Who knows if he even wanted to do it. But why did this come out over the weekend? And my answer was, as a distraction against anger in the U.S. over enhanced airport screening, these terrible machines that strip you naked. There's one company that manufactures them called Rapistan. I suggested 2 letter changes, turns the company into Rape Scan, plus very offensive pat-downs. Well, this came out to get the public very fearful of all terrorists in our midst again. So we need to do these kinds of things. Let us violate your civil rights. Let us do these things. I suspect that's the reason for the timing of that.
Okay, let me turn to Jeff Gates. I'm sorry to jump in.
Stephen Lindman, Wikileaks release as well.
Let me turn to Jeff Gates and ask his reaction and opinion on the timing of this. I mean, does it, in some ways, maybe the United States, if it's behind in any shape or form of these leaks, to distract their attention of problems at home and turn the focus over to what they want to exercise in the foreign policy arena, perhaps?
Well, this is my challenge, I think, to some of the other commentators here. I think the tendency is to shift the blame back to the U.S. That's why I called the latest book Guilt by Association, because the United States now looks, no matter what happens, we look like we're guilty because we're associated with this extremist enclave. It's absolutely brilliant at running psyops on a global scale. That's how we went into war in Iraq. It's now acknowledged, and the source of the deception is acknowledged. The subtitle of the book was called How Deception and Self-Deceit Took Us to War. You have to have both. So this deception, I think, is now becoming clear to people. What's less clear and harder to see is the self-deceit. You have to have Americans thinking, oh, my God, that we've got to lose faith in self-governance. We've really got to lose faith in ourselves and our ability to pick our own agenda and how we move forward. And I think that's what may be at stake here. And that's what makes it so disturbing, and I think the timing so very suspect. So I think to drill down that point, this is extraordinarily well timed. If there's going to be peace in the Middle East, the Israel-Palestine issue is going to have to be settled. If there's that is settled, a lot of this goes away, as our military people have acknowledged. Imagine if you're a senior military leader and you now get an order from the White House, you get an order from our civilian commanders to say we're going to go bomb Iran. What do? Knowing how we were deceived before, the U.S. has never faced something like this. This is a very dangerous time in our history if we're going to sustain civilian command. We've got military leaders saying, look, the real source of the problem here is the Israel-Palestine issue, and until that's settled, we'll continue to have these problems. So now that we get it close to being settled, what's back in the news again? Iran, Iran, Iran. Gee, what a surprise.
Well, unfortunately, we have ran out of time. So many more questions to ask. However, that was Jeff Gates, U.S. Attorney and author from Arizona, former counsel to U.S. Senate Committee on Finance, and advisor to 35 governments worldwide. Prior to that, Stephen Lemon, writer and radio host from Chicago. Thank you for your statement, Stephen Lemon. And Franklin Lamb, as usual, it's always a pleasure having you from Beirut, an international lawyer. Of course, you, the viewer, for watching. Send us your comments to newsroom@presstv.ir, and do check us out at presstv.ir and Press TV Global News on YouTube. From Ika Vatagwe and the entire team, it's goodbye.